Welcome to the Borgen Podcast, the only English language podcast about fictional Danish politics. On our show, we explore the people, events, and parties that make up the fictional Danish parliament on Borgen. I'm one of your hosts, Amy, coming to you from Istanbul, Turkey, and I am, as always, joined by my good friend and co-host Chantal, who broadcasts from her room with a fabulous view in Toronto, Canada. And this is our Season 2 recap. We have achieved Season 2.
Yes, we have. Our last episode of Season 2.
Yeah. And I have some notes, so I'll get right into it, shall I?
Right.
So I think this season focused a lot on gender roles and the divide between working life and home life for Brigitte, obviously, but also for other characters like Katrine, who was working at Express at the beginning of the season.
Michael Laugeson's paper, yeah.
Yeah, Michael Laugeson's excuse for a paper, you mean? And then moving back to TV1 after she and Hannah can't stomach Laugeson anymore. That's during the Karun oil conflict crisis, I think. Casper's past comes to the surface. That gets dealt with. And there's the dissolution of the Nyborg Christensen household as Philip feels neglected by his prime minister wife. And of course, Laura dealing with her mental health crisis, and Brigitte has to balance dealing with that and some large political issues. The season kind of opens with the death of these soldiers in Afghanistan. There's a scandal within the party as an MP, Hoxenhaven, is hounded to suicide by tabloid media rather than face exposure. He drives his car off the road. It could be, I believe it was considered suicide, right? Or is it considered an accident?
I think it was considered suicide. This is
I think so
going
too,
back
yeah.
to Troels Hoxenhaven, who had a very deep secret he was hiding, that he was a gay man, and his story got outed as he was at they were at a retreat.
Convention. Yeah, he was set up
by Laugeson. Laugeson hired this young blonde photographer to come in and to catch him in some moments of intimacy, and photos were snapped, and Laugeson, being the horrible person he was using it against Laugeson, and Laugeson couldn't handle it. Or Troels couldn't handle it.
Yeah, exactly. So then there's the oil conflict negotiation in Africa, which is a key factor for Denmark on the international stage in this fictional world. There's a failure of some key pieces of legislation and a drop in the popularity of the moderates, especially during Brigitte's absence as she cares for her ill child. I think the key points in the season, which when it came out coincided with the election of Denmark's first real-life female prime minister, Helle Thorning-Schmidt, in 2011, are the focus on the balances that have to take place for a nation's leader, regardless of who the leader is, and the idea that leadership is about compromise. In every major, that's how democratic politics works, especially in a country like Denmark, where, in fact, it's not like America where there's a two-party system. This is a multi-party system. There are often coalition governments. So, the moderates have X number of seats. There's a switch in power. They have to combine with Labour or another party who agrees with them in order to pass legislation. So you've got to constantly be negotiating and finding allies in order to get anything done. And so that's kind of emphasized here as well. And Brigitte is kind of presented to the viewers in season 1 as this idealistic kind of hopeful person. And by season 2, we see that idealism take a bit of a blow as the reality of being in leadership. This leadership role takes its toll on her personal life and her political life. She has to compromise her morals sometimes. She has to give up some of her idealism. And as I was saying in my analysis of episode 10 in season 2, politics is a huge, almost organic system, and it's kind of alive and grows and evolves during all the ages of a nation's existence. And to be in a political leadership position means working with a lot of systems that are extremely difficult to change, no matter which way your politics swing. So Brigitte has to manage within these systems at home and abroad, at home in Denmark and abroad, not at home in her home life, and then deal with her actual home life as well. We see a lot of attention paid to gender roles in this season, how Brigitte is perceived by the public as she faces down a divorce and this leave of absence to help Laura. There's a lot of questioning during her leave about her as ability as a leader and as a parent. And I remember hearing in the background of episode 10 on the news a comment that says, is she even really taking care of her daughter anyway, or something to that effect. It was a comment that puts the blame on Brigitte as responsible for Laura's issues with anxiety. But those issues, I mean, the cause of those issues, you can't pin any one thing on, and you can't say anxiety is caused by X. It doesn't work like that. This goes hands in hand with news story comments about the vacuum of power left by her leave of absence. So she's a bad parent because her child struggles with mental health. Something abstract as far as health issues goes. It's not clearly defined like a physical illness like cancer or a broken leg or something, and therefore easy to blame on family problems like a working mother. And also she's a bad leader because she takes time off. So it underlines the double standard put on working women even now. In fact, this is coming back into play as in post-pandemic world sees a shift to the right amid rising costs of living and inflation and so on, kind of globally. And if something is wrong in the family, it's because the mom is working too much. And if she's working, then she must be distracted in her work by her family, right? A lot of women do double duty in the home and in careers. And the majority of house labor still falls on women in the heteronormative family structure. So it's inescapable. During the pandemic, we saw women forced to, reduce their work hours to deal with kids trying to do school at home or being stuck at home, whereas, men continued on with their working lives, kind of, some of them rather untouched from what I've heard. And I've read a few articles about that. And I'm sure that sounds very general. And yes, I'm being general. And I know not every single case is the same. Oh, my cat just jumped on me again. And so, it's important to note that there is this double standard and women are still responsible for the majority of household labor. So we see all of this take a toll on the marriage and on Philip, who ups and quits 9 months into Brigitte's term, which is not very long. And like I said before, it's in terms of a marriage, that's a minute.
Yeah.
When you're talking about a lifetime with someone or like decades with someone, 9 months is not a huge amount of time. And becoming prime minister is a huge amount of change. So, no one seems to suggest that him giving up on the marriage contributes to Laura's anxiety. That's never suggested. It's mostly discussed in terms of Brigitte's leadership on the news anyway. He blames himself, though, and we see him get emotional about it with Cecile. And the viewer understands that he has a lot of struggle with it, but this is never voiced by him to her or to Brigitte. And we do not see any conversation between Laura and him about it. That would have been interesting. There's no conversation shown between Laura and him about it, which I think that's kind of an error. I would have liked to have seen that scene, actually. The African oil conflict was an interesting and complex issue, and maybe, as I said we were talking about those episodes, a bit oversimplified, but still a major win for her as a negotiator and as an international player.
Yeah.
In the UN and international politics, we don't normally think of Denmark as a major player. We normally see the superpower nations in that role: Britain, the US, Russia, China, France, maybe Germany as well. Germany, the first five, those are the Security Council countries, the permanent members of the UN Security Council. But Germany also has a lot of sway in the European Union. We see Brigitte able to use her idealism, her personal sensitivity, her emotional intelligence, and her diplomacy to bring that negotiation to a positive conclusion. And she also, not only with the leaders of North and South Khartoum, but also between people that she had to mend fences with in order for this to happen. Like Amir takes a step back from politics, right? The Green Party member who gets kind of run out of office or steps down from office because of his car collection and a lot of criticism focused on him. But in the end, she realizes she needs him because he's a Muslim, because he can speak Arabic. She needs him beside her to help her navigate this kind of territory, and it also bolsters her credibility.
And he's an excellent politician. Yes,
he is an excellent politician. He's got the skill set to do this, and him he along with Bent, they make the negotiations happen. He's in the quote unquote war room. He's got the whiteboard marker, you know, you got the whiteboard marker. That's important. So and I really like him here. I really like that character, actually. I like that actor too. He's been in other stuff in Nordic TV, and he's good in everything he does. We also see the other characters in flux, Casper's breakdown and reemergence as a more self-aware, if not a more stable person, although I think he stabilizes somewhat after all of that stuff comes out about his abuse, and he opens up to Katrine and he opens up to Brigitte about it. I think he gains a little more insight and a little more kind of self-confidence and a little more stability within himself. He does seem to go along with Katrine's desire for a stable life by the end of the season. We see them go back and forth about having kids, and in the end, it looks like it might be a possibility for both of them, which is kind of a nice ending for them. Mm-hmm. And we see Katrine and Hannah work for the enemy, so to speak, as they take jobs with low-life tabloid runner and Brigitte's political nemesis, Lagerson. And we see them best him with their tactics around the background story to the Karun oil conflict. And we see them both gain success after this. And that was one of my favorite scenes. I also really like Hannah Holm as a character, and we're going to be talking about her a little bit more. And what did you want to add to this, Chantal?
I just wanted to add that I agree with you. You know, we just recorded the season 2, episode 9 and 10 recap and discussion. Mm-hmm. And if listeners missed that, feel free to go back and listen to that. But we started talking about Philip and how we both noticed that he is in emotional crisis of being a father, being a husband, being the boyfriend to Cecile. And one of the things that I think, and this was your point in the last episode we recorded, is that he could have used some sort of guidance or mental health support because this is a very new and foreign situation to him, understandably, but it also has a very deep impact on him. And what I liked in this season is talking about Casper. Well, Amy and I went into Casper, like I said, on a bonus episode, but I also feel that Philip was also very, very vulnerable. So I like seeing the males of the show in this sort of spotlight where they're at a crossroads where they're deeply conflicted with the situations that they have to deal with.
Yep. Same with Bent, actually. Bent and Brigitte, when she wants to kind of dismiss him, and then he has his health crisis, but she actually ends up taking him back, and she needs him as an advisor, and she was going to send him off to the foreign ministry. So that's quite interesting. Yeah. So all of those 3 characters have these crises.
Yes, it's true. And the other thing I'll say is that the Trolls Hoxenhaven episodes were very touching to me. I'm a member of the LGBTQ community, and we recorded an episode about Trolls Hoxenhaven, a bonus episode. So I encourage listeners to go and check that out. And then Amy, with your lens, being a teacher in a high school, I think offers also a very rich perspective on the problems with Laura that we've seen manifest in this episode. So I like that both of us come from these backgrounds where we can personally speak and discuss what we see in Borgen. I think it offers a very rich conversation between us, but hopefully also with the listeners.
I hope so too. I hope that, you know, although I suppose if people are bored, they won't listen, which is fine. You don't have to, but if you like it, stick around.
Yeah, and truthfully, Amy and I really enjoy the bonus episodes because we feel we have a bit more freedom. You know, we don't work for anyone. We do this together. But what we like is in the bonus episodes, we go a little bit more unstructured. Yeah. And we get to open up a bit more, maybe talk about more personal reflections and experiences as it relates to the show. And what else can I say?
A word to that, what you were just saying, as we don't work for anyone. Yes, we don't work for anyone. We do this strictly on as a hobby. Like, we don't do it for ads. We don't have any sponsors. We don't have a Patreon. We are not professional podcasters. We may sound like we are, but we are not.
Like we are.
We may sound like we're not too. I don't know.
Yeah. We recognize it may sound like we're not, but how this all started is that, you know, in the pandemic, we decided, why don't we do a project together?
Yeah,
And we loved the
exactly.
show so much. And we literally took the time to learn everything about creating a podcast, recording a podcast, producing a podcast, having a presence on social media. So
Yeah. And we do it all ourselves. Like, we don't have any editors. We're learning as we go. As we continue to do this, we'll probably develop more skills on the production and post-production end of things. But I just wanted to say, if it seems like we're slow with releasing episodes, that is why we are slow with releasing episodes, because we both have other things going on in our lives. And like,
day jobs.
This is strictly, pretty big jobs. Like, I have a 12-day work week coming up because I'm taking as I keep mentioning, my Model UN kids. We have our first face-to-face conference since pre-pandemic coming up. So we don't always have a lot of spare time to put this show together, but we do really enjoy it, and we hope you do too.
Yes. And I mean, enjoy the podcast as much as we enjoy revisiting these episodes, because, the first time I watched it was maybe a couple of years ago. But when I watched these episodes to prepare for this podcast, and, we write the monologue and we discuss what we're going to do, it brings me back to a place of happiness and celebrates why I like the show so much. And I will say that the two standout episodes for me in this season is the two episodes in Karun. So that was episode 7 and 8. And as Amy was saying, we get to see Brigitte on the international sphere as an international negotiator, as someone who's trying to extend her efforts and her skill beyond just the country. So I thought that was very exciting.
Yeah, for sure. I did too. And those episodes and the Casper episodes as well, because I thought I like personal stories as well. But the international one was really interesting to me. And it was very interesting about the shady oil dealings and stuff, because that's like quite realistic. There's a lot of conflicts and arms dealing and stuff that happens like in these very shady ways in the international scene. And it's part of politicking. And to be an idealist, like, especially like, like Brigitte, who's obviously slightly left of center, she supports social networks, like not social networks like social media networks, but like social support networks is what I'm trying to say. And these kinds of ideologies, and then when you're up against like, oil money and arms dealing and religious discrimination and like these like kind of like South North Korea could be a united country maybe at one point or another, kind of like parallel to like what was going on in Sudan earlier in the 90s and stuff. Like, these are really tricky issues, and they're constant in the international politics world, and idealism doesn't really fit there. So you have to deal with what you have on the ground and, try to like reduce the impact of harm on the civilian population, basically. And it's not always possible to do.
Right. And she's going into negotiating with two men who are from very different backgrounds, religious backgrounds. And we will also remind listeners that Karun is not actually a country.
Yeah, it's not a real place.
Country. Yeah. Don't go looking for it on Google Maps or anything like that. Don't plan on visiting it because it doesn't exist. But it was very interesting. And of course, what sort of was the catalyst for all that was Krohn coming in,
that's right,
and asking Brigitte about this, because of course he had financial stakes in it, right?
Yep.
To be able to have the money to go in there and to develop oil, or to come out with something that will ultimately bring the Danish economy up. So there was that at stake as well, but also seeing again Brigitte's thought pattern of, is this worth it? Is it too risky? Is it gonna be the downfall of her? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Is it the right decision?
Yeah. And, in season 2, and we touched upon this in the last episode, is that we love the conflicts. And I think this is why maybe the show has such a strong and loyal viewership, is that these situations that these people face, and I had brought this up in the last episode about, the relationship between Philip and Brigitte, and then the relationship between Casper and Katrine. Everybody has what they want to do, and there are life circumstances beyond their control, and it's called real life, and it's called real pressures. And like I said in a previous bonus episode, in season 1, there is no right way or path or formula. And you had touched upon this too, Amy, like there's no handbook or guidebook of what to do. So as a human, just watching these people's personal lives unfold and how they try to contain what they want and how they feel, but it boils over. And why I connect to this show so well is that's real life. Things are
exactly
neat and packaged. And talking about Philip, so one of the biggest fans of Borgen, Richard Fernandez, who has the blog cafethinking.com, who has been blogging about Borgen for years and years and years, has written an article about Philip, and it's called Borgen in the Defense of Philip. And Amy and I had a read of it, and in Richard's article, he points out the pros and the cons against Philip. And I still am on the fence of Philip is at fault. And I will always have that stance of giving up too early on Brigitte. But it's not simple what
it's not
facing with.
Yeah.
And Brigitte's, solution was to have a extramarital affair if that's what he wants. I think Philip is naive in thinking that at their age, that one person will be your everything. And it's not true. It's not true. Like maybe when you're 16 or 20 and you're falling in love for the first time, let's say, you think this person will be your everything. But as you get older, you realize it's not.
Yeah, and nor should somebody be your everything. If you expect someone to be your everything, you're already screwed.
It's dangerous. So going back to Richard's article, what did you think, Amy, about the pros and cons of it? We talked a little bit about it offline.
Yeah, I think he made some excellent points, actually. I do think that he was right on the pros side. But of why people think that Philip is at fault. But I think that he says something like, 10 months or 9 months is quite a long time, but it's actually not. It's a long time to suffer as to have a bad period in your marriage, but it can certainly happen. It can happen for longer than that. I've known people who've stayed in marriages a lot longer than, having problems for 10 months, because you stick through it and you try to fix it. You don't just, just leave because you're having a problem. And I think in the scope of a marriage, if it's 20 years or 18 years, like I said before, we can assume that they've been together at least that long. Their oldest kid is 13, 14 years old, right? Mm-hmm. Laura, I think. Mm-hmm. So if they've been together 18 years or a couple more or a few less than that, 10 months or 9 months is nothing out of that amount of time. That's like, it's a school year for a married couple with kids.
Yeah.
And one school year isn't enough to just decide to throw everything away. It seemed very abrupt to me. I thought I thought that was like a bit of a flaw, actually. Maybe with the writing, like it would have been more interesting if they'd kept Philip trying to hang on a little bit longer. But, like we said, also, like it was his decision to leave. He decides to go. But I don't think like he suffered for an immense amount of time or anything. And I think when Brigitte brings it up in episode 10 of season 2, and she says, like, you left too quickly. Mm-hmm. She's right. He did leave too quickly. He didn't give it, there wasn't enough of an adjustment period, not even a whole year. Like, you don't even know, like, when you start a new job, you don't even know what your new job is like completely until you've been through a whole year cycle of like, the
Yes.
different stages of your
And
work.
even then you're still learning, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's like to say, like, Brigitte's the prime minister. She's not like taking up a new hobby. It's not like she's suddenly playing tennis every weekend with some other person. This is something else.
Yeah. And in Richard's article talking about, I'm just looking at it now, I have it up here, about the dynamic between them changes quickly. That's true. And some of it is due to the inexperience, like this whole thing, how it snowballs, the inexperience and sort of he says the arrogance that their relationship would survive or be like different than the people at the Christiansborg that, we know that they had relationships that failed. Yeah, I agree. I do think it's an experience, but that's what life is, right? We're inexperienced. So I do agree. I do agree with that for sure. And he says, given the time and space, the relationship could have possibly recovered, but the combination of naivety on one hand and the clear choices made by Brigitte and the other make that impossible. It's naive for the family not to have set up a blind trust in which their investments could live happily during Brigitte's period in office. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's a point. Actually, I kind of agree with that as well. It is kind of naive to think that they would come through it unscathed, but what can you do? Like you said, we're not experienced until we experience it.
Exactly. So. And this sentence here I really like. It's entirely understandable that Brigitte should make some poor choices as she tries to navigate her stressful new job. A good relationship would give her the space to make mistakes. Absolutely. But she forgets that her family can be a source of strength and support, and sometimes gives the impression she no longer values it. And in series 2, putting Laura's health before the job, then Philip begins to realize what he's missing. So yeah, I mean, all this is true, but it's such a gray area. I mean, that's what makes for excellent drama and TV, right? And makes us so engaged. What would we do? Who's right? Who's wrong? There is no black and white, but all we can do is take the sides of who we think are right and, try to have understanding for why.
I mean, and at the end of the day, it's a TV show and we all have our pet characters too. So, this is not an oil conflict negotiation. It's just a discussion about fictional TV guys, but it's fun. And at the end of the day, we're not debating politics, thankfully.
Yes, thankfully. Thankfully, these are fictional Danish politics.
Yeah.
Amy, did you want to talk about the email that we received from one of our listeners?
Yeah, we got one of our regular listeners who sent us a couple of different emails, actually, sent us one about Hanne Holm and had some ideas about her. And I thought this was really interesting and actually totally on point. So I just want to say thank you for the email. We always like to have the input, and we've had a few different people contact us. Actually, it's been kind of nice the whole time along. Yeah. And this is from his email, something to add regarding the most recent episode on the Karun peace negotiation. It's definitely true that Brigitte and Hannah, both being women, have a lot to do with the outcome of that secret meeting, right? Remember, there's like a secret meeting and like statistics are passed along and this information about money is passed along and stuff. It's worth mentioning that Hannah herself, unlike Torben, which is a very good point, used to be a foreign correspondent and very probably, and I agree with this, a war correspondent. So her professional experience, in addition to her gender, probably informed her decision. Like they have to sneak around and like go behind the backs of Lagesson, right? And they just decide to never mention that they're doing what they're doing, which is great. Right? Do it and then ask for forgiveness rather than ask for permission. Mm-hmm. And then he writes that he thinks Hannah used to be a war correspondent because of her no-nonsense attitude, her alcoholism, which it could very well be a thing. Like, I'm going to talk about that more in a second. And her poor relationship with her daughter due to her never being at home, which we saw in season 1. And all of these fit the profile of a war correspondent. And that's actually correct. I mean, like, I know a couple of journalists who work with foreign news agencies here in Turkey, and one of them is a foreign correspondent and frequently goes to conflict zones. Like he's done work from Afghanistan, from Syria, from Ukraine. And some of the stuff that people in those positions witness is pretty traumatic. So for someone to deal with trauma by drinking is fairly common. And like one of my cousins is a soldier in the Canadian Forces, and he did 2 tours of duty in Afghanistan and has had struggles with trauma related to what he witnesses. It's very clear that Hannah has this international experience. She also hands Katrine a chunk of the Berlin Wall at the end of that episode.
As a birthday gift.
Yeah, as a birthday gift, where she can't see her daughter on her daughter's birthday. So
she decides to spend it with Katrine.
Yeah. And then they form that kind of mentorship relationship, which I think is really great. And I think she's such an interesting character. And like her experience is so cool. I could watch a whole show about her.
So could I. I think she's just fascinating and admirable. And
and that actress is really good. Yeah. Yeah. And a very good performance too. And the girl who plays Laura is excellent as well. She's a really good actress. I think they're all very talented. It's a great talent pool that this show has. So I even like Sun, like the secretary, Brigida's redheaded secretary, who's kind of like shown as somewhat incompetent, and then she gets that robot lady, and it's like like Sun is so much nicer. And I kind of like how those like they're both kind of comic foils. Like they're slightly funny, both of those characters in different ways. Sun is funny because she's kind of like a bit ditzy and like a little bit, like not really. She's obviously competent.
Overly formal and maybe nervous to work for the PM, right? She's young, maybe she doesn't have a lot of experience working, and
but she's a human being.
Comic foil, yeah.
And then like the scenes with her can often be quite funny, especially the scenes with her and Casper. And then the robot lady, like the ironclad assistant that Brigitte has to replace her, it's just like so bad it's funny,
right? So, and that was in season 2. That was early season 2.
Yeah. And like she like tells Magnus like not to spill his drink. It's just terrible. And she brings him like mineral water and not cola. Like she has no idea what
I know. She has no idea, and she calls the place this is not a kindergarten, which was so rude.
Yeah, it's like, come on,
But that listener's email was really good. When I read it, I thought, wow, what a good angle.
That's really insightful.
That because I didn't connect those dots. So thank you for writing in with that. We had another listener write in, and she gave me her permission to use her handle. She is from Weddings with Love. And she sent us a message to say, if you're wondering about the name Wedding, it has nothing to do with marriage, but it is a central borough from Berlin, Germany. So greetings here. So her handle is from Weddings with Love. So she wrote into us a couple of times. And the first time she wrote into us, she said, how about talking about the private versus public Brigitte Newborg? Cici Babbitt Knudsen does a brilliant job at portraying all layers.
Yeah, she does. Yeah.
She does, because it is a very complex role to be wife and mother, especially a new PM, a first-time PM, right? Having to keep her head on at that, but also try to not control, but to keep up with what's going on at home and with her marriage, which is crumbling. And then to keep the face of the public, and I will say in comment to this private versus public, Brigitte is, and we see this in season 2 here with Trolls Hoxenhaven. This is something we talked about in the Hoxenhaven bonus episode, which is he was so terrible to her, and he was always trying to undermine her. It was clear that he wanted to step on her neck and get her job, and constantly, kind of disobey what she's saying and not respect it. But when he came to her in the biggest crisis of her life, and I will go back to from Weddings with Love, talking about private versus public. The public sphere, he wants to crush Brigitte. On the private side, he's coming to her as a listener, as a friend, as a boss. And she's able to flip that switch and not hold it against him. She was very kind and warm and welcoming. It was clear she had no daggers in his back. And she first apologized to him. So she's a woman with great respect and sensitivity.
And she tried to. Yeah, and she tried to give him some advice to help him handle that situation. And she certainly never judged him or said like, oh,
No.
well, you know, like, how could you, she could have said something like, how could you even want to be prime minister if you can't handle this? Nothing to that effect.
No, and for all the things that he did to her and all the things he said to her, she could have stepped on him. She has the power to step on him, but she took the higher road.
Yeah.
And again, she understands personal versus public, because private versus public, because Trolls Huxenhaven was in this huge dilemma.
Yeah,
about
exactly.
How can he be a politician but hiding his private life, but now the private life is coming out. So yeah, that was a good point there. And the second point that From Weddings with Love made was I think Brigitte's visual transformation from season 1 to the end of season 2 is interesting. She says slimmer, stricter, darker colors.
Yeah. Her wardrobe becomes very monochrome.
Yes.
As the season progresses, and she's either in black and white or all black.
Or dark white. Gray with a black top inside. Again, we when we did the bonus episode on the interiors back in season 1, we talked a lot about the wardrobe and how much we love her clothes and want to wear them. And I mean, as we see in season 2 here, Laura being diagnosed and going to stay at Lee's home to get better, and Brigitte temporarily handing over the responsibilities to Thornton, the second and
acting PM.
Acting PM. She's softer. Her hair is down. She's smiling more. She's wearing more relaxed clothes. So we see that too when she's at home fixing the bike. She's got her hair down, like she's more relaxed. But I also
I was gonna say, like, you can see, this is how you know Sitsi Knudsen is a good actress. One of the ways you can see this, like, there's no narrative, there's no voiceover, there's no any of these tricks that sometimes get used in series to like show a character's thoughts. We have to see it in Brigitte's body language and in her face. And Sitsi Knudsen can do this. Like, she can show us what she's feeling. Like, they often use like mirror shots in Borgen. Like, she'll be in the bathroom, like brushing her teeth or something, and you'll be able to see the emotions in her face. Or like she's looking in the mirror or looking,
perceiving herself, right? When you look in the mirror, you're like, oh my God, this is what I look like. I feel upset. I look upset.
Yeah. And that's when we see her reactions to things, especially. And I think she's really skilled at that particular thing you have to do as a film actor. Doesn't work as a stage actor quite so much, because you don't have a camera in your face. No, there's no close-ups
in these episodes. So episode 9 was mine. I noticed in that, yes, the mirror shots a lot. We see her brushing her teeth.
Mm-hmm.
We see her a couple of times putting her lipstick on. This is when she was off work and then is going to go back into the office. And one of the girls on Twitter, I'm on a little private chat group with some of the fans. They always describe her bun as the power bun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Power bun back, and she's looking all professional, and she's got her game face on.
Gonna say something. Yeah, that's her speech hair. Absolutely, I know exactly what that look is. Yeah,
I love it. Yeah. So, that's all I want to really cover. I mean,
and
I've enjoyed talking about season 2.
Yeah, it's really good, and I wish we had always intended to be a little bit more caught up than we are at this point, but life happens. So
I know, and now
we're happy to keep plugging away.
now we have Borgen Power and Glory out, and one of the things I noted now that Power and Glory is out, which wasn't out when I first watched.
When we first started doing this podcast,
is Lagesson, and how he is in season 2 here with his cruel comments on his
he's so slimy
from his website, to how we see him come in Power and Glory. And we'll talk really about that when we eventually get to Power and Glory. How could Brigitte choose him to, you know what I mean? It's
to go to for advice. Yeah, absolutely. And it, like I've said before, like, it must be so much fun. Like, Peter Morgan I guess that Mugend. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for butchering the Danish names. If it's Nyborg, it must be Mugend because of the way his name is spelled. But anyway, don't trust my Danish pronunciation, people. But the actor who plays Lagerson in real life is nice. And we've exchanged, as I said before, we've exchanged some DMs on Instagram. And he's a super nice guy, very friendly, very outgoing, very kindly, and I'm like, it must have been so much fun to play a villain.
Yes, it must have been so much fun. What a juicy role that is.
Yeah. And like, just to be able to say really terrible things.
We all don't like him.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, oh, and then to see like other roles of his and you're like, oh, actually, he's pretty cool.
He is pretty cool. So Amy, is there anything else you want to talk about here?
Yes. So the Borgen podcast turns 1 in January. And we would like to sincerely thank all of our listeners and supporters. Thanks, Mom. Whether you found us as we started discussing season 2 or have been with us since the beginning, or you've somewhere in the middle and gone back and forth, we see you and we value your listenership and faith in us to discuss the show. And thanks for coming along with us and inviting us into your homes or the car or the gym or your workplace or walking down the street, walking the dog, at the airport or on your bike ride home. Actually, you should not listen to things on your bike ride home. You should have your ears open. It's much safer. Or wherever you listen to us. It's our pleasure to be with you. And we really appreciate all the support from everyone who listens to us.
Yes. And we want to thank all of the followers on social media and all of the people who reached out to us. Thank you for taking the time to engage with us and participate in the discussion. We'd like to give a special shout out to our friend's mom who lives in Ontario, Canada, who listens to our show as she's knitting quilts.
That's not my mom. It's somebody else's mom.
Somebody else's mom, and not my mom either. I'm not a fan of the show. That's not our relative. The show keeps her company as she's working, and she really likes our recap and discussion shows because it really takes her back to relive the details of all of the episodes. So thank you for your support. You know who you are. And it was your daughter that got me, Chantal, into the show. And the only reason your daughter got into it was because of you.
No, there you go. Perfect. So she's actually our origin story. So yeah, I think I started watching Borgen because it was about politics, and I thought I could use it for my UN club, which I have done. I showed people pictures. My kids were like, what should we wear to the conference, miss? And I showed them pictures of Susie Babbitt Knudsen and Casper. I'm like, that's what you should look like. Cool. I can look like Hannah Holm. You have to look like that.
You look like Hannah Holm. The picture on our website is that
was
taken that and said, "Oh, I'm inspired by Hannah Holm."
Yes, I think that was definitely intentional. And that's kind of my style anyway. So yeah.
Yeah, it looks great. So we want to say, please stick around as we prepare to record season 3 of the Borgen podcast. We've already started planning it. And know for sure it is going to include a bonus episode where we profile all the prominent men of Borgen. And there's about 6 of them in total. And Amy and I have already started working on that. Please subscribe to us on Twitter and Instagram, and subscribe to us on your podcast app of choice so that you could be informed as soon as the new episodes come out. We've got some great things already planned and can't wait to bring them to you soon.
Yes. And we will talk about the men's. I know we have talked a lot about the women on this show, and we're both women and we're both kind of feminist women. So if it seems like we've neglected talking about the men in an empathetic way, it's coming. And we love the male characters on this show. We love
the male characters. And we like to thank all of our male listeners because, in viewing the stats of who listens to our show, there are more men that listen to our show than women right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. I would not have expected that.
I looked at the numbers a couple of days ago and I'm like, oh, lots of men are joining us. That's wonderful. Thank you, fellas.
Yeah.
So with that, we'd like to thank all of our listeners for joining us on this episode, the season 2 recap. You can check us out on our website, the Borgen Podcast, where all of our podcast episodes are archived, and you can listen to us and learn more information about us in the show. We'd like to thank our good friend Garth Jensen for providing the intro and outro music. Thank you very much, Garth. And lastly, don't forget to check us out on all social media platforms. We are there and we'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to connect with us, continue connecting with us, and share what's on your mind by using the hashtag, the Borgen Podcast, or by sending us an email or voice memo to the Borgen Podcast at gmail.com.